It was one of those quiet suburban Sundays when everything felt still except the sound of birds and the faint hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. Emma Parker stood in her driveway in a faded blue t-shirt and jeans. Staring at the thin layer of dust covering her silver SUV, she sighed. It had been weeks since she'd cleaned it. Her work as a freelance designer kept her indoors most days, and weekends often slipped away in chores and half-finished to-do lists. But that morning, with the sun warm on her skin and the smell of fresh-cut grass drifting through the air, she decided to do something different, start fresh. Even if it was just with her car, she dragged the hose out from the side of the house, filled a bucket with soapy water, and started scrubbing. The cool water splashed against her hands, leaving streaks of soap on the driveway. For a moment, she felt peaceful. Just her, the sound of running water, and the rhythm of cleaning. But peace didn't last long. The hose suddenly twisted, kinking itself, and sent a strong spray straight into her face. She gasped, stepping back, wiping the water from her eyes, and laughing despite herself. That's when she heard a voice behind her. "Need a hand there?" Emma turned, startled, and saw Ryan Bennett, her neighbor from across the street. He stood there holding a wrench in one hand, a disarming grin on his face, and a faint trace of engine grease on his fingers. He was in his early 40s, tall, calm, and had that steady, grounded look of someone who knew how to fix things. "Oh, hey," Emma said quickly, trying to sound casual, though her soaked shirt told a different story. "No, it's fine. I've got it." Ryan tilted his head slightly, amused. "You sure? Because from here, it looks like that hose is winning." She rolled her eyes, half smiling. "Maybe a little." He stepped forward without waiting for her permission and bent down to untangle the hose. "You just have to twist it like this," he said, his tone light, his hand steady. The water flow evened out instantly. "There you go. Perfect." Emma brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "Guess I owe you for that one." Ryan gave a small shrug. "Guess you do. Maybe I'll cash in on a cup of coffee sometime." "Maybe," she said, unable to hide her grin. They started washing together, though neither had planned it that way. Ryan grabbed a spare sponge and helped rinse the soap from the roof while Emma focused on the windows. It felt oddly natural, like they'd done it 100 times before. Every now and then their hands brushed when reaching for the bucket, and they'd both laugh, small, genuine laughs that carried through the warm air as they worked. Emma noticed things she hadn't before: how Ryan's voice was calm and steady, how he listened when she talked, how he didn't fill the silence with empty words. When she mentioned her work and her love for design, he seemed genuinely interested. "That sounds creative," he said, and he meant it. She found herself talking more than she expected, sharing small bits about her life, how she'd moved here 3 years ago, how she loved gardening but always forgot to water the plants, how the neighborhood felt too quiet sometimes. Ryan didn't say much about himself, just that he worked as a mechanic and liked restoring old cars in his free time. But there was something in his tone, a hint of weariness, or maybe just a story he wasn't ready to tell. By the time they finished, the SUV gleamed in the sunlight, spotless and shining. Emma looked at it proudly. "Wow," she said, stepping back. "I didn't think we'd actually make it look this good." Ryan smiled. All it needed was a little attention. She turned to him, noticing the light catching in his gray eyes. "Thanks, Ryan. Really? You didn't have to help." He gave a small shrug, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't mind. Beats spending the afternoon fixing the same old engine." They stood there for a moment, not speaking. The breeze carried the faint scent of lilacs from her garden. Something about the stillness felt new, not awkward, just aware. Emma found herself studying his face, not in the way of curiosity, but in recognition. Like she was seeing something familiar that had been missing in her life for a long time: kindness, warmth, and quiet steadiness. Ryan cleared his throat lightly. "You know," he said, "you missed a spot." Oh, she blinked. "Where?" He pointed at her cheek. "Right there." Emma laughed and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I guess I'm not very good at this." "Think you're doing just fine," he replied softly. For a moment, Their eyes met, just long enough for the world to feel still again. Then Ryan looked down, breaking the silence. Anyway, I'll let you finish up. Don't want to take all the credit for your hard work? You already did, Emma teased lightly, though her voice had softened. He chuckled, turning to leave. I'll see you around, Emma. She watched him cross the street, his easy stride fading into the distance. When he disappeared into his driveway, Stree realized she was still smiling. Later that evening, after the sun had dipped low and the air turned cool, Emma walked out to her car again. The paint reflected the streetlights perfectly. She traced her finger along the smooth surface, thinking about how unexpectedly pleasant the day had turned out. What had started as an ordinary chore had ended with laughter, shared glances, and something she couldn't quite name, a quiet spark. Maybe she looked across the street toward Ryan's house. The lights were still on in his garage. She could see him moving around inside, probably fixing something. Humming softly to himself for reasons she couldn't explain, the sight comforted her. Maybe it was because, for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. Someone had noticed her not as the woman who lost her husband, not as the quiet neighbor who kept to herself, but simply as Emma. She went back inside, made herself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The night felt lighter than usual, and though she didn't know it yet, that small, simple act of washing her car would mark the beginning of something she'd never expected. A story about healing, kindness, and the slow rediscovery of hope. As she turned off the light and went to bed, her last thought lingered softly. Sometimes, life doesn't need grand beginnings, just a knock, a smile, or a helping hand from across the street, and with that, her new chapter quietly began. The following week passed quietly. Emma kept herself busy with work, designing layouts for a small local business. But no matter how focused she tried to be, her mind wandered back to that afternoon in the driveway. Ryan's calm voice, his easy smile, the way he had simply appeared when she needed help most. She caught herself glancing out the window more often than usual, hoping to see him working on his car across the street. Sometimes she did. Sometimes he'd catch her looking and they'd share a quick wave, small, unspoken moments that warmed the quiet spaces of her day. By Saturday afternoon, Emma decided to wash her car again, though this time it wasn't as dirty as before. She filled the bucket, turned on the hose, and smiled at how much easier it felt now that she knew what she was doing. She didn't admit it out loud, but a part of her hoped Ryan might notice. Sure enough, halfway through rinsing the windshield, she heard footsteps approaching on the driveway. "You're at it again," Ryan said, that same teasing tone in his voice. Emma turned, pretending to be surprised. Someone has to keep up appearances in the neighborhood. He crossed his arms, smiling. "You're setting the bar too high. My truck's never going to compete." She laughed softly. "Then maybe I should help you next time." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that an offer?" "Maybe," she said, playing along. They talked for a while, easy and comfortable. Ryan had brought over a small pail with some wax and towels. "Thought you might want to do it properly this time," he said, handing it to her. Emma smiled. "So now you're teaching me?" "Just making sure you don't end up washing yourself more than the car again," he joked. They started working side by side again. The air felt lighter, almost playful. Emma found herself opening up more. She told him how she'd moved to Maplewood 2 years ago after leaving Boston. It was supposed to be temporary, she said, but somehow this quiet neighborhood felt like home. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes we end up where we're supposed to be without planning it." She looked at him, curious. "Is that what happened with you?" He paused for a second before answering. "Kind of. I came here after my divorce. Didn't plan to stay this long, but the quiet grows on you." Emma didn't press. She sensed there was more behind that simple statement, something personal, maybe painful, but she respected his space. Still, his honesty touched her. She hadn't expected him to share something so private, so easily. As the afternoon went on, the conversation shifted to lighter things. Favorite movies, weekend plans, funny stories about neighbors. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed that much. When the car was finally spotless, She realized hours had passed without her noticing. Mission accomplished. Ryan said, standing back with a grin. She nodded. I think we make a pretty good team. Team Parker Bennett, he said, half joking. Professional car washers. She chuckled. Don't tempt me. I could use a side job. They lingered there for a moment, caught between the lightness of laughter and the quiet weight of something unspoken. Then Ryan broke the silence. Hey, I was thinking, since we've spent 2 afternoons making your car sparkle, maybe it's only fair I buy you dinner. Emma blinked, caught off guard. Dinner. He nodded, his expression easy but sincere. Yeah, there's a small Italian place near the lake. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet views. She hesitated for a moment, not because she didn't want to, but because it had been so long since anyone had asked her something like that. But then she saw the warmth in his eyes, the kind of kindness that didn't ask for more than her company. I'd like that, she said softly. Ryan smiled. Tomorrow night then? Tomorrow, she agreed. When he left, Emma stood by her car, still smiling, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just the idea of dinner. It was the way it felt natural, as if the universe had gently nudged her forward without her even realizing it. That night, she found herself thinking about what to wear, something she hadn't done in a long time. She pulled out a simple navy blue dress, nothing too formal, but something that made her feel like herself. She caught her reflection in the mirror and noticed something. It's different. A spark she hadn't seen in a while. The next evening arrived faster than she expected. Ryan picked her up right on time, his old but well-kept truck parked neatly in her driveway. He looked effortlessly put together, a white button-up shirt, rolled sleeves, and a faint scent of cologne that reminded her of cedar and warmth. You look great, he said as she stepped out. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied. Smiling, the drive to the restaurant was quiet, in the best way, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. They talked about the town, the places they loved, and how peaceful it felt to live near the lake. When they arrived, the restaurant was softly lit, the sound of water from the nearby shore adding a calm backdrop to the evening. Over dinner, they talked about everything: work, family, dreams, even regrets. Emma found herself telling him about how she'd once dreamed of opening her own design studio, how life had changed direction after her husband passed, and how she'd stopped believing she could start over. Ryan listened without interrupting, his eyes kind and steady. You didn't stop, he said gently. You just paused. Starting again doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving life another chance to surprise you. His words caught her off guard. Simple, yet powerful. No one had said something like that to her in a long time. She looked at him for a long moment. You sound like you've done some starting over yourself. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but I'm still figuring it out. The night passed beautifully. They lingered over dessert, talking like old friends, rediscovering something they'd both lost hope. Maybe, or just the comfort of being seen. When they finally left, the cool night air brushed against them at the edge of the parking lot. Near the lake, Ryan stopped and looked out at the water. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful, I didn't expect to meet someone like you here. Emma smiled gently. Someone like me. Yeah, he said. Someone who makes the quiet feel less lonely. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. The night shimmered softly around them, the reflection of the moon rippling on the water. She wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Instead, she smiled. You have a way with words, Ryan. He chuckled lightly, just the honest ones. He drove her home, walking her to the porch like a gentleman. When they reached her door, he stopped. Thank you for saying yes, he said quietly. I really enjoyed tonight. Me too, she replied. More than I expected. He nodded, a soft smile tugging at his lips. Then maybe we'll do it again sometime. I'd like that, she said. When he left, Emma stood there for a while, watching the taillights disappear down the street. She felt something new, not just warmth, but the slow, steady return of something she thought she'd lost forever. Trust. And as she went inside, she whispered to herself, maybe life really does surprise us when we stop trying to control it. She didn't know it then. But that dinner would become the turning point the moment her quiet life began to unfold into something beautifully unexpected. The next few days passed like a soft blur for Emma. She went about her routine, work, errands, quiet evenings, but everything felt a little lighter, a little brighter. She would catch herself smiling for no reason, her thoughts drifting back to that dinner by the lake, to Ryan's calm voice and the way he'd looked at her as if he truly saw her. It wasn't just flattery. It was something gentler, something that touched a part of her she thought had gone numb years ago. Ryan didn't vanish after that night. The next morning, she found a small note tucked under her windshield wiper. "Hope your car still shines. Coffee sometime." It was written in simple handwriting, but felt personal, almost intimate in its quiet confidence. Emma smiled, her heart fluttering like it hadn't in years. She texted him back a simple yes. They met at a cozy cafe downtown that weekend. The place was warm, filled with the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon pastries. Ryan was already there when she arrived, sitting by the window. He waved her over, his smile easy and familiar. "You're early," she teased. Setting her purse down, "Couldn't risk you thinking I wasn't serious about the coffee," he replied. It became their thing after that weekend coffees. Walks through the park, shared dinners that started casually but lingered late into the evening. They didn't rush anything. They just talked about their lives, their regrets, their dreams. Ryan told her more about his past, his failed marriage, how he'd thrown himself into work afterward, how the silence of his house had become heavier than he ever imagined. Emma listened, understanding more than he expected. She told him about losing her husband to illness, about how the grief had dulled her world for so long. They never spoke about love directly, but the connection between them deepened quietly, like roots spreading unseen beneath the surface. One afternoon, they decided to wash her car again, a small tradition now, something that had started their unlikely friendship. But this time, it was less about the car and more about the easy laughter between them. The sun was warm, the air filled with the scent of soap and water. And Emma couldn't remember feeling this alive in years. "You realize we could have just taken it to a car wash?" she said, splashing a bit of water toward him. "Where's the fun in that?" He shot back, dodging the spray and laughing. "Besides, this is our thing now." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "Our thing, huh?" He nodded. "Yeah, some things are worth keeping." The words lingered longer than they should have. Emma looked at him, her heart skipping slightly. He didn't look away, just smiled, the kind of smile that said more than words ever could. Later that evening, they sat on her porch with coffee mugs in hand, the sun dipping below the rooftops. Ryan leaned back, relaxed. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't think I'd meet someone who made life feel easy again." Emma turned toward him. "Easy, yeah," he said. "Peaceful, simple, like everything doesn't have to hurt all the time." Her chest tightened at his words. "You've been through a lot," she said. He gave a faint smile. "Haven't we both?" They sat quietly for a moment. The sky deepened into shades of orange and pink. Somewhere down the street, a kid laughed, the sound distant but comforting. Emma took a sip of coffee, then looked at him. "Do you ever feel like you're getting a second chance?" she asked. Ryan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe I am," he said quietly. "Maybe you are too." The next few weeks only brought them closer. They started spending more time together, not planned, just natural. He helped her fix a squeaky door. She brought him dinner after long days of work, and slowly, what had started as friendship turned into something unspoken but deeply felt. One evening, a light rain began to fall just as Emma was returning home. She ran toward her porch, laughing, only to find Ryan standing there, holding a folded umbrella. "You forgot this," he said, lifting it slightly. She blinked, surprised. "You came all the way here just to give me that." He shrugged. "Couldn't let you melt in the rain," she laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." He stepped closer, rainwater dotting his hair. "Maybe, but I care." Something in his tone stopped her. Simple words, but they carried a weight she couldn't ignore. She felt her heart thump softly in her chest. Ryan? She began, but he interrupted her gently. You don't have to say anything, he said. I just wanted you to know. Whatever this is, friendship, something more, it means something to me. You mean something to me. Emma stood there for a moment, unsure what to do with the warmth flooding through her. She hadn't expected this, not from him, not now. But as she looked at him standing there in the rain, she realized something had quietly shifted inside her. The loneliness she'd carried for so long wasn't there anymore. She smiled, her voice soft. You always know what to say, don't you? Not always, he admitted. Just when it matters. They ended up sitting on the porch again, listening to the rain. Neither spoke for a while. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full, alive, and comforting. Emma watched the drops slide down the porch railing, her thoughts calm for the first time in years. Can I tell you something? She asked quietly. Ryan looked at her, his expression open. Always. I was afraid, she said. After losing someone, I told myself I wouldn't let anyone close again. But lately, I've realized it's okay to care again. To trust again. He nodded slowly. That's brave of you. Doesn't feel brave, she said, smiling faintly. It just feels right. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Emma, you don't owe anyone an explanation. But for what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to be afraid of being left behind. Her eyes softened. Thank you, Ryan. Don't thank me, he said gently. Just believe it. As the night deepened, the rain slowed, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and the soft hum of crickets. They stayed there until the sky turned dark. Their words fading into quiet laughter and the kind of comfort that only comes when two hearts finally begin to heal side by side. When Ryan finally stood to leave, Emma walked him to his truck. Before he got in, he looked at her one last time. You know, I think that first day washing your car was the best accident that ever happened to me. Emma smiled. You and me both. He grinned, then got in, his headlights cutting through the mist as he drove away. Emma watched him go, her heart full, not with uncertainty, but with quiet hope. Inside. She looked out at the rain-washed street and whispered to herself, maybe this is what it feels like to start over. She didn't know where it was all heading, but for the first time in years. She wasn't afraid of what came next. Winter crept in quietly, frosting the windows and turning the mornings crisp and white. Emma's neighborhood changed with the season. Slower, quieter, but somehow warmer than before. Ryan had become a steady part of her days now, showing up with coffee, fixing things around the house, or just sitting beside her in peaceful silence. It was never loud between them. It didn't need to be. Their comfort lived in the quiet, in shared looks, in small kindnesses, in knowing that neither of them was alone anymore. One Saturday morning, snow began to fall, soft and steady. Emma stood by the window, mug in hand, watching flakes dance across the street. Her car, parked outside, was already covered in a thin layer of white. She smiled, remembering the first day they met, soap and sunlight everywhere. Who would have thought something so ordinary would lead here? A knock came at the door. She opened it to find Ryan, cheeks red from the cold, holding 2 paper cups and a brown paper bag. Emergency breakfast delivery, he said, shaking off the snow. Emma laughed. You and your excuses to feed me. Hey, someone's got to make sure you eat, he said, handing her a cup. It's a full-time job. They sat at her small kitchen table, eating more muffins and sipping coffee. Outside, the world looked like a painting, quiet, white, and endless. After breakfast, Ryan stood and looked out the window. You know, he said, I could clean the driveway for you before it gets worse. She raised an eyebrow. You just want to show off your snow shoveling skills? Maybe, he admitted with a grin. But mostly, I don't like the idea of you slipping out there. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Fine, hero, just don't freeze. He grabbed his jacket and gloves, heading outside. Emma watched from the window as he worked, clearing the snow carefully, taking his time. There was something about the sight, him out there, steady and kind. doing something simple just because he cared that filled her with a quiet warmth. When he came back inside, his face was flushed, hair dusted with snow. "Mission accomplished," he said. "You look like a snowman." She laughed, handing him a towel. "Worth it," he said, wiping his face. "For you, always worth it." The room went quiet after that, the air soft between them. Emma looked at him, her heart beating faster. Something about the way he said it, casual but honest, made her feel something she hadn't allowed herself to in years. She spoke before she could stop herself. "Ryan, what are we doing?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "Biz," she said quietly. "Us. You're here almost every day. You do all these things for me. But we never talk about it." Ryan looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "I didn't want to rush you," he said softly. "You've been through so much. I didn't want to push." Emma's voice trembled a little. "You're not pushing. You're the only one who's made me feel alive again." Ryan took a deep breath. "Then let me be honest, Emma. I'm falling for you. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself we were just friends, but every time I see you, it feels like home." Her heart skipped. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Tears stung her eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of being seen. "Really? Seen again? You mean that?" She whispered every word he said. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "You make me feel something I thought I lost." He smiled gently. "Maybe we both found it again." They stood there for a moment, close enough to feel the warmth between them. No dramatic words, no sudden moves, just quiet understanding. Emma leaned her head against his chest and he wrapped his arms around her. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the world in silence. Weeks passed and the bond between them only grew. They began doing little things together, grocery shopping, fixing small things around the house, even trying recipes that usually ended with laughter and a small mess. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, as the snow melted into spring, Ryan suggested a drive to the lake, the same one where they'd eaten dinner months ago. When they arrived, the water was calm, reflecting the soft orange glow of the setting sun. They sat on the hood of her freshly washed car, another quiet tradition. Watching the colors shift across the sky, do you ever think about how different things could have been? Emma asked softly. "All the time," Ryan said. If I hadn't come over that day, if you'd said no to dinner, maybe we'd both still be lonely." Emma smiled faintly. "You make it sound like fate." "Maybe it is," he said, his voice steady. "Or maybe it's just to people who refuse to give up on something good." She turned toward him, eyes shining. "Ryan, I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I don't want to face it without you." He reached out, taking her hand. "Then don't." The wind carried the soft scent of lake water and pine. They sat in silence, letting the world slow down around them as the sun dipped below. The horizon, Ryan looked at her and said, "You know, I used to think love was supposed to be loud, fireworks, drama, all that. But this," he gestured between them, "this quiet, steady kind of love. It's what I was missing." Emma smiled. "It's what I was afraid I'd never find again." He leaned his forehead against hers. "You found it." And just like that, everything that once felt uncertain now felt right. No grand confessions, no sweeping gestures, just two people who had finally learned to trust again when they drove back home. The streetlights flickered on, painting the road in gold. As Ryan parked in front of her house, he turned to her. "Can I tell you something?" Emma smiled. "You can tell me anything." "The day I helped you wash your car," he said softly, "I thought it was just a simple favor. But that day changed everything. You gave me back something I didn't even know I'd lost hope." Her eyes glistened. "Then I guess we both helped each other." He nodded, reaching for her hand again. "And I'm never letting go." She laughed quietly. "Good, because I'm not letting you." They sat there for a while, engine off, world quiet, hearts steady. It wasn't a movie moment. It was better, honest, real, and human. That night, as Emma watched him walk up to his house next door, she felt something peaceful settle inside her. Not the rush of new love, but the calm of something true. Later, she stood by her window, looking out at the same car that had once brought them together. A small smile touched her lips as she whispered, "Thank you for helping me wash my car, Ryan." Across the way, his porch light flicked on and through the glass. She saw him turn and wave. It was simple, perfect, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt whole again.